Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave, and we'd love to know where you think we get this right and where we've completely missed the point. You can do that by visiting unsilentpodcast.com. You can visit us on Rumble, got a great comment section there, or various other social media channels. Brian, how you doing today?
Well, I'm doing fantastic because I don't live in the People's Republic of Washington.
Yeah,
I'm gonna read you a quote here from Washington State Senate Majority Leader Jamie Peterson.
Oh, yes.
This is from
I know this
about
one.
not quite a week ago.
Yeah.
And he says, and I quote, "Kids over 13 have the right to make their own decisions about their mental health care. Parents don't have the right to have notice. They don't have the right to have consent about that." So, why don't you walk us through? I think I have a high level understanding of this, but I don't know the nuance and the details. And here's why I'm asking for Kenny G, because it's my opinion that either guys like that will be looked at back on and they'll be thinking, "What the hell was that guy thinking?" Or guys like me will be looked back on and they'll be like, "What the hell was that guy thinking?" I don't
Yeah.
see much middle ground here.
Yeah, and I've gotten to a few debates on social media around this particular topic it's trending right now in Washington, and basically the idea is, in fact, I saw is someplace else a letter that went out to all the parents of school kids in the state by Molina, the people that do the healthcare, and it basically outlined that very specifically that at certain age range from 13 and above, you may not be notified by us or by the school of medical or mental procedures that are going on with your kids of 13.
And I even heard a version where, like, if the kid is assaulted by a uh, employee of the school system, you won't get notified for like 48 hours or 72 hours or
Yeah,
something like that.
that one is you will eventually get notified, but I think it's 72 hours they have to tell you about it. So, your kid gets, and there's been plenty of examples of kids being sexually abused by teachers. I mean, most
Yeah.
teachers don't, obviously, I'm not saying that, but there's been plenty of examples of that happening. And, I, as a parent, would want to know within 3.5 seconds of that happening. And I, as a
Yeah.
parent, would have a right, a moral, ethical right, and the school has a moral and ethical obligation to alert me to anything having to do with my kid. So this particular quote that you were reading by the Washington State Democratic leader is wildly controversial, but is an accurate reflection of the revision. See what's happening without getting into too much detail. And I did happen to read the entire engrossed Senate bill that puts this into practice or that's going to be voted on. So,
Yeah.
because some people, oh, you're taking it out of context. No, I'm not. I read the whole thing. I read all the marks on it. I know exactly what it says. So under this bill, it's designed to help kids who don't have great parents, and there are some that does exist, to get various kinds of help, in particular mental help, for circumstances that the school deems appropriate. And
Yeah.
of course, the major problem here. There's so many things that are wrong about this. The first problem is that the main caretaker and person of responsibility and the person who has all the rights in a 13-year-old's life is their parent. That is, you can't deny that. It's undeniable that is where the rights are, and that is where the responsibility goes as well. And so somebody arguing with me about this said, "Well, yeah, but what about the kids that blah blah blah, this, that, and the other thing?" I said, "Look, you don't design a system around the exception case, around the edge case. You
Yeah.
design a system around the majority case, and then you come up with ways to deal with the exceptions. This turns it exactly on its head and designs a system around the small exception, and therefore removes the rights and the ability for parents to care for far more situations than would occur with the exceptional case."
Yeah. These kinds of things, I just always have to wonder the people who, I mean, having gone through the process, specifically in Washington State, of writing a bill, uh, getting lobbyists involved, presenting the bill, getting legislators involved, going through the process of getting it out of committee. You know, there's whatever committee that bill goes in. The categories like education or finance or
Right.
transportation, or like there's different committees. It leaves that committee, then it goes to the rules committee in Washington State, then it leaves that committee and it goes. And this happens on the House and the Senate side. Numerous people looked at this thing and said, "Yep, that's the right thing to do." The question I always wonder is, are they truly just like trying to split the family up, or do they really believe that the exceptions that you're talking about should trump everything else? No pun intended. Like
Yeah.
it it it's just baffling to me. Like it just it makes no sense. You can't make, like you said, the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule has been around
Yep.
for a long time.
Yep.
You you have to make decisions based upon what happens most of the time. And I truly am in becoming more and more a believer that, and I don't mean this jokingly. I'm serious about this. I truly believe that the path we're on. I wouldn't be surprised if Washington, Oregon, and California secede
Yep.
at all. And
Yep.
what's ironic about that is just last week I was saying, no, I think we're I think the momentum's turning, and like and within 2 days I was regretting saying that on this podcast, because
Right.
things like this are, maybe I'm in a bubble. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm not seeing the volume of people who support that kind of thing. For that guy to go on TV and say that, like he's not in a shadow hiding. Like he's
Right.
out there and he's
Right.
got a ton of support. You know what I mean?
Well,
Um,
in it does reflect, we've talked about values before. It does reflect a fundamental difference of values on on his side of the equation versus, for instance, our side of the equation. On his side of the equation, so are they trying to break up families? I don't think they're trying to break up families intentionally. I just don't think they value families. I just don't think
right.
they
I think
ultimately.
they value the relationship between the child and the state more than they value the relationship between the child and
Exactly.
the parents. I think it comes down to that.
The idea there is that government should be at the center of the child's life, not the
Yep.
parents, because maybe there's some bad parents out there. Well, guess what, folks? There's some really bad government things that have happened too. So I will
Yeah.
put my money on the parents much more often than I would the government in terms of children's welfare.
Yeah. No, I would agree. All right, and then I'm going to get into a couple of I guess you could call them recantations, maybe
Okay.
retractions.
Retractions. Oh,
So last week I said that I was reading it live, like it just came out right before you and I started recording. So I prefaced it by saying I don't know if this is true or not, but I was
right.
citing the reports that had come out about Politico receiving like $8 million a year, $26
Yes.
million
Yeah.
altogether, or something like that. Now there's some question as not whether or not that's true. I don't know if it is to this moment. I don't know if it's true or not. But if it's not, I don't want to say things that aren't true. Um, but something else I didn't get to, and I don't know if this is true. This stuff is coming out at such a pace that it's hard to
Yeah.
keep track of,
Yeah.
and there's so much volume of information coming out now. I don't think anybody, I mean, anywhere, any journalist, anything
Right.
else, has time to vet any of these things individually yet.
Yeah.
It's just the thing for Kenny G to know. And for those listening for the first time, Kenny G is a fictitious character we're talking to 70 years from now, trying to explain what this moment in time is like in our country and across the globe. But um, a thing for Kenny G to know is, if you back up a year, 2, 3, 5, 10, for sure, the pace that news is happening right now in this moment is, I've never seen anything like it before in my life,
Right.
where every day there's, I don't know, 20 or 30 topics or events or whatever that in the old days, 18 months ago, would have taken a month for that volume of consequential things to come out. And they're just, it's daily there, it seems like. So this story here, again, I'm reading it on Twitter, so I don't know if it's true or not, but the likes of Ben Stiller were paid $4 million to go over and do that photo op with Zelensky last year.
Yeah.
I mean, so this USAID stuff that they're uncovering is like, it's really fascinating to watch how the money trails appear to be. Now, again, I don't know what they're actually going to shake out to be. So that's my first retraction. The second one is last week I was talking. We've been talking about last couple weeks about the momentum changing. Like it's okay. Like the Super Bowl was this last weekend. Trump's on the jumbotron. The crowd goes wild. Taylor Swift goes on there, and the crowd is not so enthusiastic. Right? That's a complete flip from 2 years ago. No way that would have happened 2 years ago. 2 years ago, Taylor Swift would have got the standing ovation or whatever, and Trump would have been at least partially booed or whatever.
Right.
So I said last week that I've been saying since I've been doing this podcast even longer that my belief is the crisis, the fourth turning crisis, will either be some sort of civil war, and again, I don't mean like battle lines and like armies. I don't mean it like that, but some sort of civil war.
Yeah.
Or an outside force will come intervene like they did in World War II. When Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, there was a lot of unrest internally in the country, and then we had a common enemy, and then everybody united behind that. Or the third option would be the people revolt against the government. And last week I said I'm taking that third one, the people revolting against the government, off the table because it doesn't feel like that's what's happening now.
Yeah.
And then 2 days later, I started seeing just the vitriol of the likes of Elizabeth Warren and Hakeem Jeffries and Schumer and all these people. They're just losing their minds over Elon Musk and Doge and these people going in and like looking at the books.
Right.
And it occurred to me like less than 48 hours after you and I recorded last week. Wait a second. Maybe this is the revolt against the government. Maybe they have like the Elizabeth Warrens and Chuck Schumers and Bernie Sanders and those kind of AOC and those kinds defending the government, while a huge percent of the country is saying tear it all down and let's start over with something new. Not meaning like the Constitution, but yes, USAID does lots of good things, but let's not parse those things out on the way to tearing it apart. Let's just strip it down and rebuild the good things about it. And there's a huge percentage of population who's in favor of that, and there's a huge percentage of the population who thinks that we have a constitutional crisis. So it kind of feels to me like this is maybe that people revolting against the government, but not in a way. Again, you and I we won't know until we have hindsight what that actually looked like. But maybe that's what this is kind of not a revolt against the presidency and not a revolt against Congress, but a revolt against the deep state or the bureaucracy or whatever you want to call that. It does kind of, and I feel silly saying this a week after I said this was off the table, but it really is starting to feel like that to me. And I'm not sure if I'm just being inconsistent or the volume of things happening is changing my perspective pretty rapidly. I don't know.
Well, I think it's the latter because in terms of processing the things that are coming at us and then extrapolating out what they mean, that's hard these days. I mean, it's hard for the opposition to do because every single day there's something new. There's we're renaming something or we're taking over something or we're tearing down something or something's happening. And so there's that. At the same time, that I think there's a constant drumbeat of negativity from the structural establishment against that. So I think what you're talking about is, I don't think anybody's rebelling against the government per se. We're just rebelling against extraneous structures of the government. So systems that have been laid on top of the government. I mean, the government's buried under all this bureaucracy someplace, but we can't even see it because it's so buried so deeply. And that actually goes to the first point on your first retraction about Politico and the $8 million and all that. I think what we've learned in the intervening period of time is no, there wasn't necessarily a check from the State Department to Politico for $8 million, and so here, go spread our messages. But there was definitely, in my business, I buy certain subscriptions to things that I think will help my business. I think in what it's been revealed is that there was just a wide purchasing of these different quote unquote news products from these left-leaning news sources or left-leaning, in some cases advocacy groups or consultants that are going to train on DEI or this or that or the other thing. And so yeah, the money that went to these places is went there, but it's because people in the government were buying their services at an exorbitant rate. Now, as the people that sell those services, that sell, as Political or the others, it's like, well, they were just catering to their audience, and they were making lots of money, lots of money for doing it. But it does show that there was really no control over whether it's appropriate for somebody at the State
Yeah.
Department, for instance, to subscribe to an opinion journal like Politico.
Well, and I think that the people who are there was a poll. I can't quote the numbers, and I can't quote even the exact question, but basically what it was asking was, even if it meant shutting the government down, even if it meant we went through a period of time for a few years of real hardship, even if that's what it took to get to the bottom of this, are you still in favor of getting to the bottom of this? And like 70%, if I remember right, said yes,
Yeah,
which is 70% is more than the partisan, 55-45 split that we kind of see in a lot of the polls, where you
right.
either love Trump or hate him, and all that kind of stuff, right? But more people outside of that normal partisanship kind of polling said, yeah, even if it means a few years of short-term pain, we gotta stop this.
Yeah,
And I think it goes back to, in part, like you and I talked about a month ago, about the idea when our country was founded was a private citizen and a transparent government.
right,
And that's completely upended right now. The government can see everything citizens do, whether it's your banking or your cell phone, text messages, pictures you have of your family or whatever on your phone. Like, the government sees all that stuff,
yep,
and we can pretend like they don't. They do,
yep,
right? We can't have an audit of the Pentagon where they pass an audit for 7 years that we know of,
right,
and many of these bureaucracies have never been through an audit. And as we start looking, they're losing their minds. Like, they're like,
yeah,
I had not seen. There was a video, you probably saw the video yesterday, of the whatever Democrat Congress people or whatever leading this chanting slash singing of this song they made up. But it's
right,
it's absolutely buffoonish. But they're so amped up about this more than they've been about anything else, and it's because it appears to be because they don't want that kind of transparency. Now, I'm sure they have other
right,
reasons besides just that, but I think the thing that's really pissing people off is the government doesn't want you to know anything that they're doing, but they literally hired 87,000 IRS agents to audit more people,
right.
citizens, and they're quoting things like, if you spend over $600 on Venmo, then we're going to have to take a look at that.
I saw that.
And we're finding $60 million payments, and they don't think it's appropriate that we have a look at that. Like, I
Right.
think that is the kind of thing that people are just like, I've had enough of this crap. Like, this is wrong, and if it we got to fix it, and it's going to be painful, and I'm okay with that.
Yep.
And I'm like speaking for the people who are like for this thing. It really does feel to me like it's 180 degrees what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and it has turned out, interestingly, I wouldn't have expected this, but in the most recent CBS poll, Trump was over 50% in approval rating for how he's doing. That's never
Yeah.
happened before. Um,
Yeah.
and most of and a lot of the questions about the initiatives, the border initiatives, and reducing spending and all these things are getting majority support from Americans, which
Yeah.
means, I mean, so it does surprise me that it's such a sea change because he was deeply unpopular and his ideas were deeply unpopular. Now he has done this is getting a little bit into the weeds. He's done a much better job this time around of message discipline,
Yeah.
of staying on message, and this is what we're doing. He's not calling anybody dog face or anything.
Yeah. He hasn't called anybody a pig on Twitter in at least 6 years.
Right. Yes, exactly. So the standard is higher this time. But it is amazing to me that how many people sort of have changed their tune based on the feeling in the country, because there is definitely a changed feeling in the country. The confident proclamations of the activist class are no longer accepted as gospel, and the ideas of, well, what if we cut government a little bit, and maybe that would be a good thing. And yes, there's going to be the entrenched interest that are going to fight against that, and that's what's happening. That's what we see. That's why they were talking about storming the USAID building, when I doubt that you could get 1 in 20 people that were there to really describe what USAID was all about. I mean, I'm sure they
Yeah.
could, or have any interaction with them, or nor could they describe what Doge was doing, or who the Treasury Department employees that are actually doing the work, employed by the federal government, employed
Yeah.
by the executive branch with legal jobs, what they were doing. So, I so it is interesting to see. I think that the mood is such that the Elizabeth Warrens and Bernie Sanders are going to have. I think it's going to be tough for them. I think they're going to have a tough time.
I think so too. Because I don't think that, even though there's court orders pausing things and
Right.
there's legal battles, there's probably 100 legal battles already going on
Oh
about
yeah.
some of this stuff. Um, they're not stopping. They're every day they're finding new stuff, and like it or not, think it's right or not, think it's fair or not, they're publishing it. And
Right.
Elon Musk arguably has the biggest following on Twitter of anybody, and he's
Yeah.
posting 10, 20 things a day, like, hey, did you know we spent $37 million on this?
Right.
And so I think that their argument, the AOCs and the Elizabeth Warrens and the Maxine Waters and all those, that cohort, um, I think it's going to get increasingly more difficult for them to make a case of why this shouldn't be stuff that people know, and increasingly more difficult to like make the case that it's really none of our business. We need to go back to the status quo. I think that ship has sailed
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Even for people who hate Donald Trump, hate JD Vance, hate Elon Musk and all that, it's still their money that is going to fund these things that don't seem to have a whole lot of benefit for our citizens. And I think one of the things that's uniquely American, and I don't mean that no other cultures have this, I just think that we have it more than others, is a sense of fairness. The
Yeah.
idea that you're going to tax the citizen, give that money to the government, who's going to then give it to an NGO and pay people high six figure salaries, who are then going to also subcontract stuff out to other foundations and associations and entities of whatever legal composition they are, corporations or whatever they are, who then hire lobbyists to then give money back to the people in DC who write the laws and make that circular siphoning of money from the taxpayer. I think that people just, they're going to have a hard time explaining that away in a way that people will just say, "Oh, okay, that makes sense. 20% of my taxes should go just to waste because that's just the way it's." But I think that's a pretty tough argument to make when people get past the "I hate Donald Trump" stuff.
Yeah, it is. And part of what I think has happened now is, for a long period of time, people have just been cynical about all these things. They've been, well, yeah, politicians lie and bureaucrats take money and these big institutions
Hmm.
get bigger. But what can we do about it? There's nothing we can do about it. And so
Yeah,
that somebody comes in who actually does do something about it, and who is cutting billions and billions and billions from the budget. And people are like, oh, I guess we could do something about it. And so
and we could have been doing something about it.
we could have been doing something about it all along, and we just gave up because we didn't think there was any point, because we just were resigned to this being the way things are from now on. And it
Yeah,
turns out that it's not necessary that this is the way things are from now on. And that then disempowers those that depend on the sort of lethargy of society to let them do whatever they want, because they can't stop them anyway. So now
yeah.
we can stop them. We can stop them. We can reform the systems. It's not going to be perfect, but it's sure as heck going to be much better than it has been.
Yeah, and I heard Newt Gingrich, who was the Speaker of the House in 92 or 94,
94,
whenever the
94, yeah.
Republican Revolution was,
Yep.
whatever they call that. I don't remember what they call that, but um, he made a comment yesterday that he's a big Ronald Reagan fan, obviously, that people Republicans that generation are. But he said, Ronald Reagan brought down the Berlin Wall, but even he didn't have the balls, essentially, is what he's saying, to go after these bureaucracies. And he's like, I'm a huge fan of him, and he did tremendous things. But this administration is doing something that even Reagan wasn't willing or able to do, which is take these guys on in a very public way and like truly go in and just start dismantling things. And I think you make a great point there that we all kind of had this nebulous idea that things weren't great and they weren't the way they're supposed to be and it's not fair and whatever, but we didn't have any specifics to hang our hat on. Now we got a boatload of specifics to hang our hat on, and like, wait a second, explain this one thing or that thing. And then I got one more thing I'll get to, and then I'll let you. I know you got some stuff you want to talk about today, but I've really been over the last week thinking about this. As I mentioned last week, that the Twitter video that went viral, a guy named Isaiah Carter. He looks a lot like me. He's black, but other than that, him and I like look very similar. There's pictures of him like riding the subway. He's just a regular guy, right? And he made this video about 3 minutes. It's too long for us to share on here, so otherwise I would. But it's about a 3-minute video, basically talking about why he went from being I think Bernie's like supporter, like working in the campaign or something. He was involved somehow. I don't know the details, but he was somehow. It wasn't just like a voter. He was involved, and he's now left the Democratic Party. And one of the things he said was in this video that went viral, is that these people, meaning the Democrats in charge now, are more interested in looking like they're doing good than actually doing good, right? And I've really been thinking about that. You and I talked about this like a year ago, but it seems to me like this might be one of the pillar undergirding kind of transformations that happened through the leaving the 1940s from the last four turning to this one. Is I imagine like back then a guy would you've seen the video of the guy who saved those hundreds of kids in Europe from they were all Jewish kids, and he saved them, and then they went to a movie theater. There's like hundreds of people, and they didn't tell him that they were there, and then they all thanked him because he like smuggled them out of the country or whatever. Like you've seen that video, right? Where they're at a movie theater and like everyone gets up and like he did that without thinking anybody would know, thinking anybody would remember, thinking it would bring him any kind of notoriety. He did it because he felt a duty to do that. Right. And now we're 180 degrees where they don't feel a duty to do anything. They feel they feel a compulsion to look like they're doing things. Which is I think that transformation of people being honorable and having duty and doing the right thing, even if it almost always meant they got no credit for it, just because it was the right thing to do, to now we have a situation where looking like you're doing the right thing is way prioritized over actually doing good things. You know what I mean? I think that transformation might be one of the pillars of this kind of unraveling and fourth turning and all that stuff as we go from the new institutions being established in the late 40s to where we are now. I can't think of anything other than like government bureaucracy and like secrets and the CIA and all that, all that kind of stuff. But certainly that stuff is a big deal. But as far as our society, I can't think of anything that's a bigger lever in this whole mechanism of the change from 1940s to now and this like cycle, the four turnings we go through in the cycle than that. That seems to be like one of the main things that of the contrast and why things are falling apart.
And that seems to me to be the thing that the establishment folks have missed in terms of unraveling. In other words, so absolutely that's what it was. And so we had incredibly strong establishments built after World War II, and it was infused throughout society, that all of these things are noble things, they're great things, they're wonderful things. And for a while, for the most part, there were problems, but for a while they really were. And so you don't question the police, you don't question the military. They say to go to Southeast Asia and fight a war, well, go to Southeast Asia and fight a war. So all of these different things that have happened have been sort of, and especially recently, the last gasp of the old institution against its own unraveling and building a new institution. Now, what is fascinating about that is that, and one of the things that actually makes this current revolution that we're undergoing possible is the very mechanisms of the media that were the primarily the last supporting pillars of the old institutions. Those outputs of media have become so diverse and so uncontrolled by the old institutions that they are being used and have been used to unravel the old institutions rather than to bulwark them against change. So for a period of 10 or 20 years, I think exactly what you're saying is what happened. People were pretending to do the right things. Look, okay, we're going to spend some money here, and that's going to indicate that we're righteous people because we're spending money against homelessness, even though we're not doing anything about it. We're spending money against it, or we're
Yeah.
spending money against equal rights, or we're spending money against all these different things.
Or
And
I'm just in front of a crowd with a microphone at a podium saying all these things that have to happen, even though I have
right,
no intention or ability or desire to
right,
do the things. As long as I'm the person saying that those things have to happen, I'm the hero now,
yeah,
even if I don't actually do the things, which is 180 degrees from the guy in the foxhole in World War
sure,
II who would not come back. Like everyone has stories of grandfathers and uncles and things like that who came back from wars like that who would not talk about what happened,
yep,
and they would later find out, oh my goodness, Grandpa was an actual hero.
yeah,
They would find out from Grandpa's friends after Grandpa died that all these great things he did because he didn't want to talk about it because he had a duty to do that stuff, but
right,
it didn't. He didn't get off on being in the limelight over it.
yeah,
That's and same thing with the press. Like the press had a duty to expose corruption and abuse and all those kinds of things. And now they're driven by likes.
right, yeah, exactly. And since they are driven by likes, and since people have had enough, since people are fed up, and since they're hearing other voices that they weren't allowed to hear before, that hold on society is unraveling before their eyes. Now, and
Yeah.
then the other thing, because the Trump wave, the populist wave, the anti-establishment wave, if you will, all of those things would not be possible if there was a controlled media. If the only information we could get were what the three-letter, networks
Yeah.
provided, and all of this, none of this would happen if that were not possible. And they tried to make it not possible. They tried to shut down voices that were contrary to their establishment supporting beliefs. They tried to shut down Trump. But that was really, I think, a turning point when none of that worked. I mean,
Yeah.
they unleashed everything they had against Trump, and he just bounced back all the time. So,
Well, and you still see it in real time now. I mean, you and I have talked about this before also, but Elon Musk buying Twitter and
yeah,
turning it into X, where like basically a free speech platform. I still see politicians almost daily post something on X and then get community noted because they just haven't figured out that you can't say the propaganda there because there's people
right.
who actually pay attention and like catch you and they look worse doing that than if they just said nothing.
Yeah, yeah, and so the whole system has shifted underneath underneath the feet of the people that were establishment supporting folks, and now it's changed, and
Yeah,
now that
so
means
but
where it's going to go.
yeah, well my point with this whole thing for Kenny G is I don't believe you can have a society that is not bound by duty.
Right,
I don't think you can have a functioning society that's bound on the appearance of doing good versus
right,
actually doing good. I
right,
think that's one of the very fundamental things that's this 80-year process of things unraveling.
right.
I think that's one of the key elements of it, at least for now. Maybe I have my own biases like everybody else. Maybe I'm paying attention to things that are not. I'm not weighting it properly because of my own biases or whatever. But it sure seems to me like that's one of the fundamental things that's
Sure.
causing the corruption and the bastardization and the theft and the all this stuff. Like you look at a bureaucracy that has hundreds of thousands of employees, and every layer has that of people who want to look like they're doing the right thing, but actually not doing the right thing.
Right,
I Eventually you run out of money. You eventually run out of somebody else's money to fund that.
right. Yeah, and eventually like in both positively and negatively, human nature always asserts itself, and so humans at the end of the day, humans are we behave according to meritocracy. We behave according to do this, get this. We incentives and disincentives. That's a meritocracy. It doesn't take any high-minded philosopher to determine that. And eventually, people get tired of living in a system that doesn't behave that way. And so, no matter how you organize it, the Soviet Union was always doomed to fail. It took 70 years, and it's unfortunate that it took 3, 4 generations for that experiment to collapse, but it was always doomed to collapse.
Yeah.
The kind of uh, hyper technocratic, bureaucratic way of running the United States was always doomed to collapse. It just took longer than I would have liked, or most people would have liked,
Yeah.
but eventually it does, because it's not aligned with how human beings really behave as a general rule.
Right. All right. So what's going on in the world of AI, Dave? It's been a while since you updated us on that. What's going on there?
Well, there's some fun talking about human nature. The big rivalry. I'll just mention this in the analogs, or in the annals of fun gossip, and that is that Elon Musk and Sam Altman. Elon Musk, of course, being the richest guy in the world, running several of the biggest companies in their industries in the world, and Sam Altman being the guy that runs OpenAI, the purveyors of ChatGPT and other things, who used to be friends, who used to be partners. I mean, Elon was a part of OpenAI at the beginning, then they split, and they just really can't stand each other now. And so
Okay.
so this is, so you're always going to get corporate rivalries. I was I was reading recently about the formation of U.S. Steel. Andrew Carnegie, who had formed his own steel company, brilliant guy, driven all that, and then of course J.P. Morgan, who did one of the first huge roll-ups in to create U.S. Steel, and there was clashes there. There's always these titan clashes that happen in society. Now, maybe in Kenny G's day, it'll be about. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it's about space travel and space mining rights in the asteroid belt, or something
Yeah.
like that. But
Or AI robotics. I mean, it'd be
or robotics or
those would be
something
like the
like
two primary thing, or maybe the only other thing I can think of would rival those two things would be like water, like desalination and stuff like
yeah.
that, or those kinds of things.
There's all sorts of cutting edge stuff that it could be about, but it was fascinating to me to watch Musk trying to undermine Altman by setting a value on OpenAI at much more than Altman had, which then uh, generally raises the bar for Altman to buy the company, take it private. Now, but what's really interesting to me is Sam Altman's predictions about what this all means. What about, in particular, what AGI, artificial general intelligence? Most of the AIs that we use now are very specific intelligence, which is around certain things or around chatbots, this type of thing. An artificial general intelligence is an artificial intelligence that can behave much as a human. We are AHIs. We're not AHIs. We're HIs. We're human intelligence, and we're general intelligence. So we can behave in a whole variety of different realms,
Yeah.
and be good. So one of the things that Altman said this last month was that AGI promises for perhaps the next 10 years, by 2035, every single human being on Earth will have the capability of all of us put together now. So, in other words, we will have every one of us will have PhD level access and information available to us on every last single thing. So it changes, and this changes. The other change that this will likely mean, and I probably won't be around to see it. Maybe if they get smart enough, they can prolong life for 300 or 400 years. Then maybe, well, who knows? But Altman's predicting, for instance, the end of all disease, the end of all premium for knowledge work. So if this last week, I'm using a research grade artificial intelligence that when I ask it a question, it can query more texts, more information than a PhD student, a PhD grad student would query in their specific field in college. So I can get literally more. In one that I did, it was on medicine because I was talking to my dad's doctors. I was able to get higher levels of information than the doctor had received their entire time during their medical education, and share that with them. I didn't lord it over them or anything, but it's like
Yeah,
3
yeah.
or 4 different medical journal posts on a particular narrow subject. So this now, what will that likely do in Kenny G's day? I suspect, as one of the predictions Altman said, was that the with these tools, we will be in a society and economy where everything will be smart, every last device and thing will be smart, everybody will have essentially PhDs at their fingertips at all times, and the premium for information will be virtually zero. So, in other words, right now, if you've gone to a lawyer recently, the premium for legal information is pretty high. You go to a doctor, a specialist, cardiologist, a pulmonologist, whatever. The premium for good quality information is very high, and information is highly scarce. There's a doctor I'm trying to get into. It's nothing life threatening or anything, but a doctor I need to get into. That I got to wait 2 months because there aren't enough of them. That information is not contained in enough human brains, so there's enough of them to serve. So the current medical scarcity. I mean, across society. I don't. I was with some folks today in a dental nonprofit that I support, and they're talking about the lack of people in the dental field to do work, and so sometimes you have to wait for a very long time for something that can be very painful. Well, what if there was no premium for that? And you have actors, whether they're people or robots, that can take action on this information that you've got. How will that change society? And I think, I mean, all these people like Altman and others make predictions on what that will mean, but we really don't know. I mean, we've never experienced this before, and it's quite probably. Well, here's one of his quotes that I found interesting. The price of many goods will eventually fall dramatically. Right now, the cost of intelligence and the cost of energy constrain a lot of things. So the amount we pay for intelligence and energy is constraining. And the price of luxury goods and a few inherently limited resources like land will rise even more dramatically. So this would be a sea level shift from how society works now to the way it will work in Kenny G's day, and he will face a completely different world than we can even imagine today.
Yeah. Well, correlating this with the fourth turning, the last fourth turning was in the 1930s, 1940s, somewhere in there. Okay. If you look at what life looked like for the average American in 1925 versus 1945,
right,
it's night and day. I mean, 1925, there's still, I would, I don't know if the numbers, obviously, but a decent part of the population still used horses, not cars.
Right.
And then after World War II, like we're on the verge of going hypersonic speeds in airplanes. I mean, it's night and day difference. The technological advancement we made in that short 20-year period, and there's no way somebody having a beer at a speakeasy in 1925 could have forecasted what it would look like in 1945 with all this technology and machinery and things that had been developed largely through the war effort, but even in other ways, computers. I mean, the first computers were starting to emerge in like what was 1950 or something like that. So, the technological jump in that 20-year span was massive. And I think we're going to go through the exact same thing with AI as we went through kind of that. It's not the industrial revolution, but I don't know if you call it machine revolution. I don't know what you call it, that
the intelligence revolution.
Right, I'm saying I don't know what the leap was called from 1925 to 1945. It wasn't the industrial revolution, but it's some kind of mechanical revolution, whatever, technological revolution. But this is going to be an artificial intelligence revolution, and it is going to change our lives in ways that we can't even imagine. And we're going to be looked back in 2025, in 2045, the same way. Like, how do these people get along without this stuff? Like, how could you live a life without having a robot take care of your entire household for you that knows the right things to do and helps you take care of your baby, all that stuff? I mean,
Well, and it's fascinating. I watched JD Vance's presentation at the European AI Summit. It wasn't a long one. It was like, I don't know, 20 minutes or something like that. But he was talking about how we need to approach artificial intelligence in the West, because negative actors, authoritarians, will approach it very differently,
Yeah.
and the Europeans right now, as an example, are approaching it very, very cautiously. There's a lot of stuff. OpenAI can't release a lot of stuff in Europe because of their safety guidelines. And whereas Vance and Trump, in the American vision of that, is very much what they call accelerationist. Like, we got to move faster, and the Europeans are like, no, we got to slow down. And one of the things that I found interesting, I don't remember who it was in this last week that I was listening to, talked about the resistance to any new technology, and the doom and gloom that people said it would portend. So, for instance, the printing press in the 1500s, people railed against the printing press. We cannot make the written word available to anybody, because what will they do with the information? And hearkening to our own day, there was a great fear that the printing press would result in rampant misinformation.
Yeah, yeah.
Just like the internet, the automation revolution of the 50s and 60s, a number of leading scholars were predicting in that day and age that this is going to displace massive amounts of people. We're going to have mass unemployment as automation takes over in factories, and we're not going to be able to deal with it, and it's going to be, society threatening. The move from horses to cars was very similar. The
Yeah.
move from the non-connected computer to the connected computer over the internet, very similar. There's been a
Or
bunch.
taking the computer from only being available in corporations to making home computers. I mean,
Yeah,
that was a
making home
huge leap.
computers.
And the
What
internet,
do
of
you
course.
possibly want that for? It's
Yeah.
it's just going to lead to all these negative human ills. But the fascinating thing is that in each of these situations, yes, some of that occurred. Sometimes people printed in the mid 1500s and late 1600s things that weren't true. What do you know?
Yeah.
But it does happen. But the on balance effect of these things has always been to improve human standards of living. But it is also important. I think what Vance said was exactly right. I was skeptical about, how much does he really know about this. I mean, I spent a ton of time on it, and that's not his job. But
Yeah.
his position on his strategic position on that, I think, positions us incredibly well to compete against the authoritarians of the world, who could also use it for very negative purposes. So generally,
Yeah.
I'm optimistic about that.
Yeah. I tend to think of these kinds of leaps like, 40 years from now, it's going to be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But the next 7 years might not be very fun with it.
Right. Yeah.
You
It'll
know
be
what I mean?
disruptive. Well, it's probably ended up. Here's a prediction for you. It's probably ended up like, at one point, horses were necessary for daily life, and now
Yeah.
horses are only owned by people who like horses, who like to ride and do these kinds of things.
It's a
Probably
hobby.
your average car that you and I drive, probably going to end up in the same way within maybe 5 years. I wouldn't be surprised at all, or maybe 10 years. Society takes longer to change than technology does. But when you're sitting at home and you need to go someplace, and an automatic Uber shows up in 5 minutes and takes you to whatever place, I mean, I rebel against this emotionally, but logically speaking, it's going to prevent accidents. It's probably going
It's
to be
an
great.
it's a natural progression. That
It
that
is.
kind of stuff, like the transportation stuff and the manufacturing, like it all seems to make sense to me. The part that I'm a little more unsure for sure, uncertain for sure, is like you were talking about how this specialized knowledge will be available to everyone and essentially free,
Right.
right? That's the part that I wonder, because one of the memes that you see, like, I don't know, I see it like every couple of weeks, it seems like.
Yeah.
It's been around for 20 years, which is, remember back when we thought the internet was going to make everybody smarter?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we've had the internet for a long time, and
Right.
arguably we've gone backwards, not forwards, in some regards.
Yep.
I kind of wonder, like, just because people have access to more information and it's better
Sure.
information, it doesn't do anything about compelling people to do anything with that information. Like,
Right.
people are still inherently lazy in some
Yeah.
cases, and content. And when they find contentment, they don't do anything else. And
Yeah.
it access doesn't solve that. You know what I mean?
Well, yes, and I think probably what will happen as well along those lines is we're just finally now in 2025 getting a little bit comfortable with the internet. I mean,
Yeah.
in terms of actually using it in a very utilitarian fashion. So it'll take probably a generation, maybe two, to fully realize what artificial intelligence can do in a very practical, until it becomes commonplace. I mean,
Yeah.
the way that people treated cars when they were first out, it took 20 years, maybe longer, before they became so commonplace that people use them in mostly practical ways. It was a novelty at
Yeah.
first, just as the internet was a novelty from the 90s through the 2000s. And, maybe you can say now it's still used in weird ways, but at the same time, we're more adept at including it in our daily lives. So I'm sure that same, because the transition technologically will be much easier than it will be mentally and sociologically across the
Yeah, like
cultures.
looking forward, even if it's 100 years, to a point
Yeah,
where it seems almost inevitable that we will create AI robots that take care of energy, housing, and food and
yeah,
water. Like
yeah,
it seems like inevitable that those four things will be taken care of, where it won't cost people hardly anything, if anything at all,
right.
to eat, get water, have a safe place to sleep, and have power, or
Right.
whatever, right? That part seems like inevitable and simple,
Yeah.
right? Not that it's gonna be easy, but like simple. I can wrap my head around that. The part I can't wrap my head around is, if you're a human who has all those things, what gets you up in the morning?
Yeah. Sure. Exactly.
I mean, what the scarcity that we've all known for centuries is what's given us purpose.
Right.
Okay, well, if you take that away and you don't have purpose, uh, you can look throughout history, and people who don't have purpose start doing pretty nasty things to each other.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that is, I think, the biggest danger is that where our entire societies, all of our societies have been scarcity focused societies from the beginning, because guess what? Things have been scarce.
Yeah.
if
But if you look at a guy like Nero, who had everything, right?
right,
If you're the emperor and you have everything, in the beginning you seek more pleasure.
right,
Well, at a certain point, pleasure doesn't do it for you anymore, and so what
right,
you start doing is you start imposing pain on others,
right.
and that's just a natural. That's just how the human
Sure.
psyche works. And so that's the part that scares the hell out of me. It's not.
Yeah.
It's I can't wait till there's free power. I can't wait till you just
Yep.
get a house because we have robots that are AI that build houses and people don't. I can't wait for that part. I'm terrified as hell about
Yeah.
what a society with no purpose is going to look like.
Yeah, exactly. Unless there's some way for us to change what we are motivated to do, and give us motivation that could, basically turn into the matrix.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Dave. Well, the news is happening so fast. I don't even know if we can talk about topical things and have a good representation of what's going on, because things are happening so
Yes.
fast. One of the things you said earlier was, Trump's got more positive, a better.
Approval rating.
He's polling better. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I saw something the other day that he had 11 total days in his first 4-year term where he had a net positive favorability rating,
Right.
and he's already at 21 out of 21 days in
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah. It's a completely different scenario.
Yeah, it's a wild time to be alive, as they say.
It is.
That's a pretty popular saying for Kenny G. I'm sure he'll read about that in history books, or whatever history books look like then. But it's a wild time to be alive is a pretty common saying, and boy, is it
Yep.
true.
It is.
All right. Well, as Dave mentioned in the beginning, we'd love for your feedback. If you think there's something we're talking about that we completely missed, we'd love to hear about that. Or if you think there's something we said we got right, we'd love to hear about that too. We're trying to explain to future generations what it's like to live in this moment in time. And Dave and I certainly can't do that all by ourselves. So we'd love to get feedback from other perspectives. You can do that at unsilentpodcast.com, or Rumble has a great comment section. And until next time, this is Dave and Brighton signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be on Silent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.